ESPN's new rankings paint a bleak future for the Pelicans, but they've completely missed the mark. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week. And ESPN is not feeling good about New Orleans. We're going to break down their future power rankings, who New Orleans is behind, where they fall into this. It's kind of shocking here. And then I'm going to tell you why they're wrong. I get where they're coming from, but they're missing the mark on a big reason, and I'll tell you why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your first bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, you can watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday at 10:30 a.m. So ESPN just released their future power rankings. They do this every single year. This projects the on-court success for each team for the next 3 seasons. So this upcoming year and then 2 seasons after that. And they don't feel good about New Orleans here. I want to just run down the whole order for y'all so you can see exactly who is in front of and behind New Orleans. And spoiler alert, there's only one team behind New Orleans. Number 1 is OKC. That doesn't surprise me. Number 2 is the Houston Rockets. Same kind of thing. 3 is the New York Knicks. 4 is the Cleveland Cavaliers. 5 is the Los Angeles Clippers. That's shocking. 6 is the Golden State Warriors. Also surprising. 7 is the Orlando Magic. 8 is the Los Angeles Lakers. 9 is the Denver Nuggets. 10 is the San Antonio Spurs. 11, Minnesota Timberwolves. 12 is the Atlanta Hawks. 13 is the Boston Celtics. 14 is the Miami Heat. Indiana Pacers are 15. Mavs are 16. 17 is the Memphis Grizzlies. 18 is the Pistons. 19 is the 76ers. 20 is the Raptors. 21 is the Milwaukee Bucks. 22 is the Portland Trail Blazers. 23, the Charlotte Hornets. 24, the Utah Jazz. 25, the Sacramento Kings. 26, the Washington Wizards. 27, the Brooklyn Nets. 28, the Chicago Bulls. And 29, the New Orleans Pelicans. 30, the Phoenix Suns. There's only one team ranked behind the New Orleans Pelicans in ESPN's future power rankings. Now, again, this is only the next 3 seasons, and I do think that is worth mentioning here. But I don't think New Orleans is 29th over the next 3 seasons. They were previously 16th. What they said about New Orleans is this. Quote, "It has been an eventful summer in New Orleans where David Griffin was let go after running the team for several years and was replaced by Hall of Famer Joe Dumars. The Pelicans then made a massive draft night swing by not taking only Jeremiah Fierce 7th overall, but trading an unprotected pick in next year's draft to Atlanta to take Derik Queen 13th. An unprotected swap, it's not quite a swap, it's just the unprotected pick, to take Atlanta to Atlanta to take Derik Queen 13th. That move could have ramifications for both teams for years to come. As a result, New Orleans has its lowest landing spot in 16 years of these rankings." I don't think New Orleans needs to be 29th. We will look at that a little bit more in the second segment of today's show. There are 5 rankings or 5 categories they use to kind of rank everything here. 1 is players. Number 2 is money. Draft is 20th. Market is 28th. And management is 29th. And when you kind of get into this, the way they kind of do these results is Quote, "We determine the most important category is a team's current roster and the future potential of those players. That category accounts for 50% of each team's total future power rankings, the 1 to 0 score each team receives to determine its overall ranking. At the same time, we looked at management, ownership, coaching, a team's spending habits, its cap situation, and the reputation of the city and the franchise, and what kind of draft picks we expect the team to have in the future." You know, New Orleans, for the most part, controls their own future and has additional draft picks here. So to put their draft picks at 20 out of 30 is a little bit shocking to me. Certainly, if they had their own draft pick next year, this number would be dramatically higher, I think. But they're still not in a bad position overall, especially if you're factoring in players because they can acquire some of those picks. More on that a little bit later here. You know, players being 24th is kind of shocking too. You know, if Zion Williamson is healthy, with Trey Murphy, with Jordan Poole, with Herb Jones being healthy, the team can still be pretty good. Zion alone being healthy is a game changer for the New Orleans Pelicans. The question is going to be if he's healthy, which is something we've talked extensively about this week, and Joe Dumars has even talked about this week as well. So it remains to be seen if he will be healthy. Certainly that is going to be a concern for the team here. And I think by ranking the Pelicans 24th, ESPN and the people that vote on this are clearly saying we don't trust Zion Williamson to be healthy at all. You know, money being 15th is kind of surprising to me here, middle of the pack for a team that's never paid the luxury tax. Not that they've had a reason to pay the luxury tax, but I wouldn't have ranked that higher. Draft, I think, should be a little bit higher than it is. Market at 28th out of 30. Like, it is what it is here. The most concerning one is management coming in at 29th out of 30. That is massively a concern. The only team that ranks worse than them in that is the Sacramento Kings, who are 25th. You know, it speaks to the process about hiring Joe Dumars. They rushed that hire. This was something that, you know, was telegraphed that they've been thinking about for years, had not done, hired kind of an outside person in Joe Dumars in David Griffin, didn't like it, and then just kind of went with the known thing, even if that isn't the smartest move. And look, I hope Joe Dumars succeeds. You know, it's still too early to tell whether the Derik Queen trade and some of the other moves he's made are good moves or not. You know, if Derik Queen hits, even in a year or two, we're going to kind of forget about that draft night trade, and it's going to look like a smart move for the Pelicans. So, you know, this is them projecting that it's not going to go well. This isn't anything that is set in stone. The future is unwritten, to use a cliche with all of that. But they do not feel good, despite having guys like Jeremiah Fears, Derik Queen, Zion Williamson, and some other young talent on the roster. Players ranking 24th. Look, rookies take a couple of years to develop, so we shouldn't necessarily expect Jeremiah Fears and Derik Queen to contribute this year or next year. And when this only projects the next 3 years, that is going to kind of hurt New Orleans in all of this. So I get it to an extent, but just to an extent. When you look at some of the other teams that are higher than them, the Los Angeles Clippers being the one to me that really is like egregious to everything, right? They say, as for the roster, the Clippers are working on 2 timelines over the next 3 seasons. I don't know what the 2 timelines are. They have Kawhi Leonard and James Harden under contract through 26-27, and then they don't have young talent ready to replace those guys. And we'll get into why they think the Clippers should be 5th. That's in the 3rd segment of today's show. But keep that in mind. Same for the Golden State Warriors. You know, you're good now, but when those guys are gone, you're in a really rough spot, I think. Let's talk about, though, why they missed the mark with the Pelicans. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. So think about the last time you had an urgent need. Maybe it was for a plumber or a service provider. We just had someone come to look at our AC because it's broken. First person didn't answer. I called the next person. They're getting a ton of business to put in a new AC compressor and unit and everything here. You move on. That's what you do when you have an urgent need. So that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. So OpenPhone is going to let you manage business calls and texts from a single app, and the shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. And now OpenPhone is offering Locked On Pelicans listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have an existing number with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's Locked On Saints with host Ross Jackson, covering everything black and gold here. I was the QB play from Spencer Rattler. I thought he looked pretty good, but did the film back it up? Ross Jackson's making sense of everything black and gold over at the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're looking at the NBA, ESPN's future power rankings for New Orleans, and I think they missed the mark here. I think they very much missed the mark even over the next 3 seasons. Right now, New Orleans is going for it. They're trying to win. They're trying to be competitive. And you would project, because Zion Williamson is under contract for the next couple of years, that's going to be their plan. So if they're trying to be competitive, unless you think they're going to completely fall on their face, and look, maybe you do, a lot of people are, they're going to be fine, I think. You know, if Zion does all the right things, again, it's a big if. I'm understanding of that. It's a big if. But Zion Williamson is proven to be such an impactful player that very few players are. He's under contract for, hey, look at this, 3 more seasons. You have 3 more seasons before you're like, we're just going to let him walk for nothing or just get rid of him. You can try and build around him and make it work, and you have that ability. You know who doesn't have the ability to try and make it work around Zion Williamson? It's 29 other teams. Any team that doesn't have him whatsoever. The Utah Jazz, if you're looking at success over the next 3 seasons, they're not going to have more success than New Orleans. They don't have the blue chip guy to build around. They're still looking for that guy. It's not Larry Markkinen. They would have gone all in behind him and started trying to win by now. He had an incredible Eurobasket run, looks like an all-NBA level player, and they've not tried to build around him at all, instead tank. So now they're just going to change that when they haven't really gotten guys in the draft that you're like, these guys are going to be good. Maybe it's Ace Bailey, but Ace Bailey's going to take 2 or 3 years to really kind of be a number 2 guy in the NBA. And at that point, Larry Markkinen's 30-something, and you've kind of missed the window on this. That's not what you want to be doing. I don't know how the Utah Jazz are ahead of New Orleans here. Well, I do. It comes to one of these categories that I think is really dumb, and we'll talk more about that in the next segment. You know, you look at a team like the Chicago Bulls, and I think their write-up the Bulls is really interesting. 28th, Chicago Bulls. In terms of wins, it's unlikely Chicago will finish this low after posting 40, 39, and 39 wins, respectively, over the past 3 seasons. Yet few teams have less hope of becoming a contender than the Bulls, who have prioritized competing for the play-in over grander ambitions. Chicago has gotten younger. Well, the other stuff doesn't matter. You know, the Bulls, who have prioritized competing for the play-in over grander ambitions. You know, you could argue New Orleans is kind of doing the same here, that the Pelicans are just looking to get into the postseason without being true title contenders. Certainly, I think that's a very valid and fair thing to say. But that also means you're going to win. Like, if we're looking at this over the next 3 seasons, Chicago is going to have more success than the Utah Jazz will. It's as simple as that, right? And the NBA Future Power Rankings are ESPN's projection of the on-court success expected for each team over the next 3 seasons. They're going to have more wins than the Utah Jazz. Simple as that. They will. So how are they ranked behind him over the next 3 seasons? At the end of the day, this is about winning. And I think when you look at some of this is a lot of national media just wanting to justify things they've said. And there isn't actually much like logic or thought or process put into some of these rankings here. You know, read what they say about the Utah Jazz. In his first offseason as president of basketball operations, Austin Age signaled that the Jazz are still taking a long-term approach after drafting Ace Bailey with the 5th pick. Utah moved on from veteran guards Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, and starting forward John Collins, so the Jazz might not need to sit key players to rack up losses this season. The problem is Utah's rebuild, which is entering year 4, hasn't produced an all-star centerpiece to team up with or supplant Lauri Markkanen. Why are they higher than some of these other teams here? There's no reason for this. You know, their players are worse than New Orleans are. They rank them 27th. New Orleans is ranked 24th. So what are we doing when it comes to this? I find this to be kind of ridiculous, truthfully, in my opinion, to see this. This just feels like ESPN is like, we're going to say the Pelicans are bad, and we are going to, it's like what we talked about the Golden State Warriors yesterday. You can want Trey Murphy all you want, but if New Orleans isn't trading him, who cares? And this is where like ESPN is trying to like will the Pelicans into being bad. And I'm not going to say they're going to be good, but they're going to be better than the Utah Jazz because the Pelicans are trying to win, whereas the Utah Jazz are not. The Washington Wizards players are ranked 29th. And, you know, if they said if we're basing this on draft assets and cap flexibility, the Wizards would rank near the top. They could have up to $80 million in cap space next summer. So what? The Wizards are bottom 5, however, largely because of a roster that features a league-high 10 players on first-round rookie contracts. You know, if former first-round picks take a big step in development, you could see the Wizards taking a jump on the list. You know who I trust to be good next year? Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, Jordan Poole. You're not looking for those guys to take leaps, maybe Trey, but you know what the floor of those other players can be. These rankings make no sense. ESPN has completely missed the mark. They say this is about the success over the next 3 years, but they're kind of doing this of like, what's your success going to be over the next 8 years? That's what they're basically saying here. And I'm kind of shocked by this, truthfully. You know, it shows you why, and I mean that kind of selfishly, but also not. Like, this is why you come to Locked On for things or other outlets, right? This is why Locked On as a network is so important because clearly the national media doesn't get it. Like, this is genuinely confusing to me. I'm even getting, like, I'm finding even more threads that when you pull them apart here, like, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. You know, even a team pushing for the play-in tournament that doesn't have championship aspirations is going to be better than a tanking team over the next 3 years. You know, if you were, again, looking past those 3 years, I'd put maybe the tanking team beyond the Chicago Bulls. But that's not what we're doing here. If we're kind of following, like, the rules they set forth, New Orleans shouldn't be 29th. You can not like the management in Joe Dumars. 29 out of 30 says they don't. That's fine. There's still talent here in New Orleans and on this team. And they're going to go out and they're going to try and compete. You know, for all you can knock Joe Dumars and his drafting, the trading, all of that, you know, he is working on culture-based stuff, which, look, everyone's working on culture-based stuff. And I think culture can be a little bit overrated. But maybe we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. I actually like that as a topic for Monday's show. And so when you see that, right, like, cool, all these guys want to win. They feel they can win. They're not going to go into the season feeling defeated like they can't do anything. That's great. Want that. Perfect. But the talent's still here to be good enough. They just got to stay healthy. But no one's talking about health in this. Just say that, right? You're mentioning Jeremiah Fears, Derik Queen is why this team's going to be bad next year, but not like, hey, Zion looked really good at the end of the year. There's reasons to be very optimistic here in New Orleans, and I think ESPN is just either purposely ignoring that or they just don't care. One of the two. There's no reason to think that this team is going to be that bad when it comes down to it. You know, and I also think that some of the categories they have here, particularly the money category, is very, very overrated. And I'll explain why and how that relates to the Pelicans. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it just fits however you want to bet. Player props, same game parlays for a bigger payout, or even jumping into live game action as it all unfolds here. So you can make every game more exciting, whether you're watching your favorite team play or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to Sundays. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget, you can also watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every weekday at 10:30 a.m. By the way, talking with some people, that DirecTV deal with Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network is actually a bigger deal than you think. It's not just, I hadn't put this together. It's not just for you to be able to watch the games at home, which, look, that's obviously a very good thing and very important thing. All for that. Don't get me wrong. But most bars have DirecTV or DirecTV services. And this basically means every bar across the city is now really going to have easy access to Pelicans games. So when you're out there on a Friday, on a Saturday, maybe you're wild and it's a Wednesday, ask them to put on the game. They're going to be able to do so very easily. It also means you can watch Locked On Pelicans, Locked On Saints, Locked On LSU, and Locked On SEC if you have DirecTV as well, starting at 10 a.m. every single weekday on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. That's also pretty cool here. So I've been saying I think these ESPN Future Power Rankings are missing the mark here. Ranking the Pelicans 29th just feels silly to me. They are making too much of salary cap flexibility. And not just salary cap flexibility, but just cap space. You know, when you look at what they say about where to go, the Los Angeles Clippers here, you know, we talked about their two timelines, which that never works. You know, they said the current version is a win now team that features 11 out of its 14 players, including Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, under contract through 26-27. The second version boasts flexibility to reshape the roster starting in the 2027 off season with only center Ivica Zubac on a guaranteed deal. LA could boast up to $140 million in cap space that summer. Wow. Here's the thing. There's going to be nobody to spend it on. Don't care. This is dumb. Like, this is where they don't get it. Free agents, big time free agents, don't change teams in free agency. They just sign extensions with their current team and get traded later. It's not even through big time sign-in trades or anything like that. It's just usually they sign an extension, get moved at a later date to the team of their choice. That's how it works. You have $140 million in cap space? Cool. Don't care. There's not going to be anybody there. There's not going to be two max level guys that you can spend that money on. They're going to be on a different team already that traded for them and then either extended them or they, traded for them after they signed an extension. They also don't even have first round picks to trade to get those guys into there. Maybe it's like, oh, well, they could absorb contracts into the cap space. Cool. Good players you still need to trade things for, and it's going to need to be future first round picks. And guess what? They don't have any and might even lose more potentially in this Kawhi Leonard situation here. How are they going to use that $140 million in cap space to make us believe that after the 26-27 season, so 27-28, that they're going to be really good? No, there isn't. It's dumb. Same with the Golden State Warriors. Oh, they might have cap space. So what future first-round picks do they have to trade for those guys that they can put into the cap space? They don't. Picks and stuff matter so that you can get those guys on extensions. We are in the extend and trade era right now, not the free agency era. That's not how this works anymore. Teams don't let their guys hit free agency. It's just a fact of how it's operating here. So ESPN putting so much of like a emphasis on money here is truly like bizarre to me here. Brooklyn's got all that cap space. Cool. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do? Cool. You get Jonathan Kuminga. It's not going to elevate you that much. If he was, it wouldn't be kind of lingering with the Golden State Warriors. It's going to be those type of players. Oh, they can sign restricted free agents to a big time offer sheet. Cool. You know who can match the current team? So you're not going to get restricted free agents. That's not really how it works. Players rarely take the qualifying offer to then hit unrestricted free agency after their fifth season. That's the way you'd hope to do it, but they'd rather just take the guaranteed money, play in a place, and then maybe force a trade later. I think these future rankings are just so weird to me. If players matter more so than anything else, make the players matter more so than anything else. Brooklyn being fourth in players, but yet they're 27th. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about the rankings. I was like, hold on here. How can you have the players be that low? Their players are bad. There is legitimately that here. But having a bunch of cap space doesn't mean anything here. I think with New Orleans, you can also see them pivot, right? Like they can go all in on Zion. We talked about this in yesterday's show. If you think he's going to be hurt and not playing, if you believe in Zion and go for him. If you think he's not going to be playing, just trade him away and you can get all the future first round picks you want, or trade, you could have a fire sale and acquire all of that and feel really good about where you're going to be in the future when it comes to your future draft capital. Not all first round picks are made equal. That is certainly true, but you have ways to try and go and acquire some of that and could be in a very good position with picks in the future, which would then thus elevate you in theory. Again, it doesn't help you in 3 years. It helps you way more. There's too much of an emphasis on draft capital here, unless you're going to use that draft capital to trade for players. That's where this stuff matters. ESPN has missed the mark entirely on these rankings. I don't disagree that OKC should be 1, even that Houston should be 2, but I would put Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs way higher than 10 because Wemby's going to be good. I wouldn't put the Denver Nuggets 9th. I'd have them higher because they have Jokic, who's the best player in the world, and that's going to take you further than anything else. That matters more so than other things, not potentially having $140 million in cap space. So I kind of hate this. Do you think the Pelicans are 29th in the future rankings over the next 3 years, or should they be higher? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, this week of Locked On Pelicans. I'm pre-recording the Monday show, so just in case anything breaks, we will get to it on Tuesday, which is media day. So I'm excited for that. Monday, I want to talk a little bit about culture. Is it overrated? I do think it's kind of overrated, and I'll explain why. So that's going to do it for this show. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all on Monday.